Peace, love, knowledge, and freedom, and welcome to another episode of Frail Conversations. Today, I have the pleasure of, connecting with one of my brothers, man. Like, I admire this brother so much as far as the scientific mind. Like, it's like I be in awe sometimes of the research that he finds and puts together. And I'm like, yo, we got to do something that's related to uh, the science aspect of everything and just masculinity and so frail everything. So we decided to come together for so frail conversations and the importance of STEM. Like I said, my brother just like he puts so much emphasis and so much of his energy into the STEM discipline, and I just had to have him on. So without further ado, I introduce to you my homeboy Pat. Pat, go ahead and let him know a little bit about yourself and what you get into.
All right, peace, peace. Thank you for having me on your platform. Great to be here, and I admire you just as well, and in other aspects of, just black masculinity and everything. But yeah, as he said, my name is Pat. Full name is Patrick. um, you can find me on IG at BK Big Brother, BK Big Brother. Everything is lowercase on IG. And I do have a website for more so for tutoring and STEM related stuff. It's www.patrick, Patrick, Akande, AKANDE.com. And you could you can connect with me on either IG or through my website.
All right, so we got a very, very impactful thing. So I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're diving into so frail conversations and the importance of STEM. Oh, yeah. And don't forget to visit IamJustSeen.com. There, you can get all things Just Seen. You want to add the So Frail series to your library? Visit IamJustSeen.com. You want to learn how to master the market for serious trading and investing? Visit IamJustSeen.com. You want to get your hands on some exclusive merch like tees, hoodies, coffee mugs, hats, bags? Visit IamJustSeen.com. Are you thinking about transitioning into the plant-based lifestyle? Visit IamJustSeen.com. You ever want to just chat with Seen about anything from simple advice to mentorship? Visit IamJustSeen.com. Anything and everything that is me, you can find at IamJustSeen.com. So just take a quick peek into my world and see why being just seen is nothing less but always more. Because you never really know what you need until you see it. You will never see it unless you visit IamJustSeen.com. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. We're gonna go ahead and hop into this, like without further ado. Like I said, STEM is something that within the Black community that it's kind of like we fear and we shy away from, but we need to be actively engaged in. And I've learned that over the time, as the Black community, what we like to do is we like to work physically. We pride ourselves on working physically, but we rarely pride ourselves on working mentally. And that's where our game changer is, and that's what we need to get into. So that's why, like I said, that's why I brought my brother Patrick in, because it's like when I see STEM, I understand STEM, and he understands STEM as well. But we need everybody to collectively understand its importance, because as the world moves, this is where it's going to go. So my first question, for you, Pat, is what exactly is STEM? Like, I know what it is and you know what it is, but like, what is it? How would you describe and define STEM for people?
Right. I mean, it's everybody know. Well, let me not assume that everybody knows it, but a lot of people know it. The acronym stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That was devised in about, I think, 2002. Dr. Judith, I forgot her last name at the moment, and it just gained widespread acceptance throughout the world, actually, not even the nation. And, it was just a convenient way of referring to the academic disciplines of each one that I just mentioned. Before that, it was SMET, still the same thing: science, mathematics, engineering, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, at the surface of it, that's just what it is: science, technology, uh, engineering, and mathematics, and trying to incorporate that into educational framework of different, systems here and across the world, so that, like you said, um, because our world is moving to a very scientific way of doing things.
Okay, okay. So um, that, in addition to moving into the scientific way and everything like that, what would you say is the the major importance? Like piggyback on that, can you kind of elaborate? Like, what is the importance of it? Because I'm seeing now that, just from the perspective of how healthcare is moving, and the
Mhm.
importance of even knowing that aspect of it. So what do you see, like, for as far as the importance of what STEM is actually going to do for, I guess, the world, and then specifically for us as Black people?
Right, right. Well, to really encapsulate it, and it took me a very long time to get to this understanding, because uh even today, many people on television, on radio, on podcasts, they separate the world of STEM and our humanity, you know.
Mm,
And I had to come to the understanding and to the realization, spiritually, on a spiritual level, that these things are not separate. They work hand in hand, you
right.
know. They're a direct reflection of us, and we are a direct reflection of science, or of STEM, if you want to call it that. I just put the STEM under the umbrella of science. So it's important because it's going it's the study of how I relate to the world and my environment, and how the world or the environment relates to me. So the energy that I put out there is the same energy that I'm going to receive.
Mm,
They're saying energy is neither created nor destroyed, but transferred from one entity to the next.
right.
That's what it does. So, the importance of it is profound, is deeply rooted, and there's a spiritual connection, especially for us Black people. Um, it allows you to see where we were coming from, and it also allows you to see where we're going, as individuals, as a family, and as a community. You know, I hear a lot of people use, or they use the terms or different terms, such as, oh, our children, we need to expose them to the STEM fields. We need to
Right.
prepare our children for the 21st century, or we need to advance technology. And all these things sound good, but that's not the reality of what it is. You know,
Hmm.
STEM has never been foreign to us. STEM has always been around, but it's there's other entities that have tried to definitely hold us down in different forms. And let's take Kemet, for example.
Hmm.
STEM was very, very much prominent. Let me not even say that. STEM was a daily practice within the historical context. you know
Exactly.
and let's take Imhotep, for example. Imhotep was an architect, an astronomer, a physician. Isn't that an embodiment of STEM?
Yep.
Um,
Multi-genius.
right. And then, but we never hear about this person in history. And if we do, it's a very short segment that they talk about this person. And why isn't Imhotep um, mentioned or looked at when we get into, I don't know, our first year or our first semester in biology class? You know, you have the founder of the Mali Empire. The reason the Mali Empire became so thriving, so successful, is because the wealthiness through crop selling. You know,
Hmm.
that's an agricultural scientist right there. If I look at it in today's context, you know,
Facts.
and of course, Madam C.J. Walker, they got something on Netflix now where they just it's just kind of it's so dramatical. It's great and stuff like that. But you're talking about somebody that was suffering from a scalp ailment and hair loss. Not only did she, cross the lines of business, but she merged science with it. For her
Exactly.
to have the C.J. Walker Laboratories and train sales businesswomen, you don't think that stirred up the pot for those sales businesswomen to be like, let me, do some chemistry in my house, see if I can, make this product even better and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
from that, Walker, just to have a lab, a black woman, to have a whole lab, like, come on. Just think about that makes me smile. You telling me
Yeah.
that's not the definition of STEM? So that's why it's so important for our people, for our brothers and sisters to know, yo, STEM is not something that we just, do. We recognize on a monthly basis or something like that. I can't forget George Washington Carver, prominent black scientist, agricultural scientist, an environmentalist, an
Hmm.
advisor to presidents. That's why it's so important to have STEM, like, not just uh, uh, something that we touch on here and there, or it's just something that you do. No, it's something that you are.
Mm. I like how you put that as something that you are, um, because we see that we kind of like mystify science. We
Yeah,
see it as something so complex and so out of reach within our community that we think it's only like a select few that are able to actively tap into it. You know what I
right,
mean? And that kind of it hinders you. Like I knew growing up when I was in school, like I loved science classes, but my homies they liked it too, but they thought it was too hard. I'm like, it's not hard, bro. It's just, as long as you pay attention and you go through the scientific method, whatever the case may be, you'll get it. But
right,
it becomes taboo because science is automatically connected with the mind. It's automatically connected with your mental space. And like I was saying, it seems to be something that we get scared of. We get scared to use our mental power. You feel what I mean? We get real scared to use our mental power. So with that part, because it's very clear that you were never afraid to use your mental part, your mental power. What is your field of expertise? I was a forensic biologist when I decided my route, but it was more so within the realm of my I guess my scientific thing behind it was to to solve things from the perspective of death. That's what originally got me into the game. So
got it.
what's your field and like what sparked you to get into the game?
Okay. Well, I I always was interested. I was always interested in science because I would see what is this guy's name? Bill Nye the Science Guy on television.
Yeah.
And that was so cool because it's like, yo, these things are happening, but in that white coat is not somebody that looks like me. His mind
Mm.
is really cool how it works and everything, but like, yo, can it be somebody that looks like me that does these cool things that I don't know about? So that always sparked my interest in terms of science because it's cool. Also, when you have different uh like superheroes and things like that, they have these kind of like scientific minds of how breaking things down and stuff like that. So I always thought, it's always cool, to see somebody like a Bruce Banner turn into the Incredible Hulk, but these were all white guys. So
Right.
as I went from like elementary school to junior high school to high school, I would just take more pay more attention to when we were in lab class or when we were doing dissections or when we were learning about planting a seed and things like that. So when I finally got to college, I had an opportunity to work on a simple nervous system, which is crazy because a lot of people are like, oh, so what model did you use? I used the oyster, and I
Hmm.
just oyster after oyster. So my background, or my training in the biological sciences, is primarily focused on neurotransmitters.
Hmm.
So talking about things like dopamine, serotonin, GABA, a whole host of things. So it's neuroscience slash neurobiology. That's my specific training in. And then I went on to focus more on neurofilaments as well.
Hmm.
That's when I moved to the Midwest, and now currently I'm adding to my arsenal environmental analyst basically. So I work for the health department as a scientist, looking at water quality and things like that.
Yo, that's dope. And because like and even though it's like segmented, it all
Mhm.
still has to go hand in hand and has to go and coincide. Because like I said, it's things that we apply, every single day that we have to connect to our daily lives. But
Right.
then even though it's separate entities, you still have to have that foundational point in order to be able to thoroughly understand it, you
Yeah.
know. And like neuro, like that's a dope concept. Like neurotransmitters, man, like that's that's fire. That's fire. And then to segue it into the environment, because you know the things that we consume on a regular basis are going to affect our nervous system. They're going to
Yes.
affect, you
Yes. Yes.
know, that component. So it's you're bridging it, you're bridging a new gap. You feel what I mean?
Yo, that is it. Like I that and that was, in between. I know we'll get to this eventually, but in between those, journeys, it was always like, how can I bridge the gap between the scientific community and my everyday community? And
Mm,
it was a pull. It was always a pull because it's like the scientific world, they don't really care about what's going on in the black community. They just give out the information. And by the time the information gets out there, it's 5 years old of information that probably can't even help me, you know?
right.
So yeah, bridging that gap.
Yeah. So um that 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 sets a major tone because as black men we're always faced with the whole conceptualization of masculinity, toxic masculinity, and things of that nature.
Right.
So with STEM being science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and then masculinity, as I define it, is the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment of the essence of analysis and deconstruction.
Right.
How do you think these two components merge?
Hmm. I've read your book, and I mean, it's not something that you just read and you put down. If a person that's reading to, allow themselves to grow, and I'm talking about both books, the third one soon coming,
Mhm.
that's a shameless plug right there. um, it becomes a study tool for the rest of your life. And the way I don't really think they merge. I think there's systems in place to keep the two apart. You know,
Mm,
because the definition that you have laid out is for a man to be a man, and and especially a black man, and you just can't operate in STEM as a man because there's two things that will be challenged. One of them that you talked about in your book is respect. And the other thing that's going to be challenged is your identity. They're going to be challenged at different levels, at different stages, maybe around, because everything is nice and sweet when we get into elementary school. Oh yeah, yeah, you saw the frog, you probably petting the snake. It's all cool. The game is all fine because you don't have a true identity of yourself, and we're going to help you mold an identity of yourself, which is probably going to be associated to a title. Like people get blown away when they're like, you're a scientist? Yeah, just because I'm wearing a do-rag and I'm chilling doesn't mean that I don't know shit, you know.
right.
And it just becomes a whole. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to have to try and find your identity when you get into that quote unquote higher level of education. If you're pursuing a master's or a PhD, and like how you shared with me, MD, questions will come up and you have to answer those questions for yourself. Do I want to continue along this path in a way where I dilute my masculinity, or do I go against the grain and just, stand firm, stand on my square, and speak with my chest out because I am smart and I do have something to say, and I'm not going to let anybody define or dictate that for me.
Yeah, that's a fact. Like I crossed that bridge, and for those that are listening, you have to understand that what we're discussing right now is not manliness. We're discussing masculinity as an essence.
Right.
So the two go hand in, like STEM and masculinity go hand in hand. There's no way around it because masculinity incorporates your intelligence factor, your ability to analyze and deconstruct the world.
Yeah.
STEM is the world, is four basic processes on how you analyze and deconstruct the world. So the two have to go hand in hand, you know. So when we're as black men, before we're black men as black boys, while we're in school, we're not learning how to learn our environment through a masculine essence. We learn it through a feminine essence, right? We're taught by most of our teachers are women, and then a lot of them are white women at that, but most of our teachers are women. And then the teachers that we have that are men, they have learned and been infused within a feminine essence. So they're not able to tap into the masculine essence to teach us correctly. So how masculinity works in the school system for a boy is that we don't remember things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a feminine essence. Femininity focuses on detail, but masculinity focuses on principle. So where it happens with us is we need to know the material. We don't need to remember it. We can't. So when they start to bombard us with a whole bunch of information that we have to remember, that's where we start to struggle with. That's where our struggle comes in. So they don't know how to teach the principle with that. And because of that, by the time we get up to, as you were saying with the higher academia, where our masculinity starts to get challenged, because if we make it that far, our masculinity is intact. So we are analyzing and deconstructing. But the problem is they just want us to remember. They want us to remember information. They don't want us to go in and peel back the layers on things and dive deeper into it. And if we do, it's those who do, they kind of silence us,
Yeah.
because when you're putting in all of this work, I may be the focal point that, say you're doing a research project, I may be the focal point that brought this to reality, but it's the collective team and it's the head of this person who gets the credit. I don't get that point that my mind, that my intelligence analyze and deconstruct this. But in that, it's like, okay, just do what you're told. And to do what you're told is just to rely on your memory, you know. So in that space, I happened to go to a HBCU. So a lot of the scientific people around me, they were black. So how was your experience? Did you go to an HBCU, or like how was your scientific experience in higher academia?
Mm. So I went to a, I don't know why it's not coined an HBCU, which is, I guess, for political reasons, but I went to a predominantly black undergrad university, Medgar
Hmm.
Evers College. So
Okay.
that name alone, I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna have to delve into the history of who Medgar Evers was, and actually know why I'm here, why these professors are conducting themselves the way they are conducting themselves. And, I was just fortunate enough to be in that type of environment, which allowed me to stand square, to stand with my chest out, to speak with a certain level in my voice. But the way I got into the whole research component was that, like I said, it was oysters. I was offered a summer, quote unquote, summer job. He was like, the my mentor at the time. He was like, you know, if you want to get paid, you can get paid for the summer. I'm like, doing what? Working in a lab. I was like, a lab? I don't know what a lab is. So I got
Hmm.
into it, and fast forward, you start going to these conferences. You know, when you're going to these conferences, you're giving your poster presentation or your oral presentation, and this is where the intellectual wrestling comes into play. You know, you have I'll call it what it is. You have a white professor that comes up to you, and it's many, many people at these national scientific conferences. My specific one was a white professor came up to me and was asking me questions about the oysters that I did not know.
Hmm.
And my mentor came afterwards and told me he knew you didn't know those answers, but he wanted to show you that you didn't know those answers. That's why I mentioned earlier the whole respect component, you know.
Facts.
And I'm not saying that because he mentally tried to wrestle with me about that question that he was asking me, that I submitted and that was it. Like, okay, now you got it. No, it became an enlightening moment that, yo, you got to understand what you're getting yourself into, right? So going back to my university after each scientific conference always made me dig deeper than just the science of it. Know why you're doing this. Know who came before you. Know who came after you. You know. So in higher education, it just allowed me to see real in a deep sense how different things were put into place to challenge your masculinity. Take, for instance, people who are going that PhD route, that they have to do a defense. You know, you have to defend the work that you put in to a committee that's going to ask you questions or for your memorization.
Hmm.
And it's unheard of. It's just like, yo, you expect me to remember all these readings that I did to the point where your passion for the topic that you picked up, or your love for what you were doing, it becomes diluted at each stage, at each level, at each correction of your writings and everything, because it's just like, is it really worth it? Ask
Yep.
most people that's chasing that PhD route. You know, is it really worth it? And it is to some, but at what cost? Because your masculinity as a black man has now been kind of, it's been tampered with.
Yeah.
And then you just got to rebuild, and it's not just easy like that. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Most definitely. Most definitely. And it gets one of the difficulties is already having that stigma going into it that you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. You feel
Right.
me? So you know that you put in a whole bunch of work. You put in all the work that you needed to, and then they're still saying now you have to still do more because from that perspective of that level of science, they're not really seeing and respecting the value. See, I've learned just from my own experience that sometimes they're not paying attention to the information you're presenting. They're paying attention to you.
Right.
And it's
Right.
not even what you're talking about. And a lot of times, they're not even able to quantify and speak on the things that you're talking about. So it's like, how can you like, and see, that's like you were saying, it's very, very emasculating because it's like, how can I defend something? Why, well, not how, why do I have to defend something that I did the research for, that I did the study for, that you're just critiquing?
Right. Right.
you know they end up just critiquing it, and it's like, okay, I feel like it should be the other way around. you know you have to, you as the committee and the chair, refute what I'm saying. Can you do that?
Right.
Like, it's
And
not about me proving it. Can you refute what I'm saying? Because I've already done the work. You feel me?
it's so, because when we look at our, who we are, the essence of who we are, and coming from, Afrocentric bloodline, when you look at villages and stuff like that, and you see, the children speaking with the elders, they sit together as a collective on the floor, maybe in a circle. There's an exchange of information. It's
Hmm.
not a debate; it's a dialogue. You know, and but when you get into these rooms, these people are sitting on tables. You got to stand up and give your presentation. And, yeah, people may be listening to this and saying, oh, he probably was chasing a PhD. All right, cool. I'll leave a PhD alone, right? After you get your PhD and you get your doctorates, for those that are going into academia as professors and stuff, you're chasing tenureship. You have
Yep.
to prove yourself to become a tenured professor. Why? You have to prove yourself to get that grant money so you can run your lab. That's even if they give you a lab in the building that you need to be in. So, like you said, at every stage, you have to continuously prove yourself. For what? Or, most professors, they go in wanting to enrich, wanting to enlighten. That is the heart of why I joined STEM, not to do this, back and forth with the opposing masculine, or what they deem as masculine energy, you know.
Yeah. And when we get caught up in that, like, this is us speaking as grown men now. Like, okay, they're gonna challenge us to see, test the wits or whatever the case may be. But it's like, this starts when we're boys. Like, we were able to overcome this in elementary school, middle school, high school, because we were able to continue to perform. But this starts as boys, like, having to present and being challenged when you're giving your experience. Like, science, I just from my homies and stuff that I talk to, it's like science started off as fun. It stopped
Right.
being fun when I started being challenged from it. Like when I'm explaining, hey, I did the, we all did the cliche carbon dioxide, the baking
Yeah.
soda and vinegar thing to blow up the balloon. We all did that like second grade, third grade, but we're excited about that,
Right.
but then that transition happens to where once we do it and we say, okay, this happened because of this. And as I'm explaining it to you, you're like, you're trying to, you know, intimidate me and take that excitement away from me. It's like,
Right.
so what about this part? And then you're asking me things that my mind may not even be able to conceive at that particular point that I shouldn't be, really focusing on. So the whole the process of science, like learning the scientific method, from the hypothesis to testing the experiment, all of that, like learning that whole process, when you
Mhm.
start to see how how structured it is, it it kind of defeats you because this now requires masculine energy, analysis and deconstruction. It doesn't require me to remember the details, but they ask about so many details. They try to fill your mind with so many details and have you rattle them off, and that sets the tone to defeat us as Black men within our mind. So it's like we know that we're not going to learn that because we don't remember. Like contrary to how people perceive the intelligent Black man, we don't recall anything. We know what we're talking about.
Right.
We're not remembering anything. We know what we're talking about because when you analyze and deconstruct, you break down a principle. And the reason why masculinity leads to the principle is because you don't like the details can confuse you. But if as long as you know the principle, it doesn't matter what the details are.
Exactly.
You feel what I mean? And that is that is like you have to have that in STEM. But when we're taught from a feminine perspective, which is, as masculinity is the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment, the essence of analysis and deconstruction. Femininity is the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment of the essence of synthesis and construction. So
Right.
it's a detail base, and we're taught to, every memorize things. This is why it's like we 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 kind of get into those moments where it's like we encourage people to do spelling bees. We
Hmm.
encourage people to do trivia. You know, those are all feminine based because it's based off of memory. It's based off recollection. How many of us are pushed to join the math club, pushed to join the science club? And then when you see the kids who are struggling with mathematics because the teacher is teaching them to remember, but not how to multiply or not how to divide. It's like you see this flashcard, when you see these two numbers, here's what it is. So like I've seen kids who like they can understand that eight times seven is 56, but they will struggle with seven times eight.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
like, are you teaching, or do they really know the principle of multiplication? Or are they recalling the details? Because now when you go into your algebras and your calculus and different things like that, you cannot rely on memory for this. You need to know the principle of why it works. You see what I'm saying? And I think that is one of the quintessential pieces that kind of damages us when it comes to the STEM disciplines. Because a lot of us see them as hard because we get intimidated from the beginning because you try to that entire pool, that entire discipline aspect has to be through masculine energy.
Right. Right. That's why I do believe that the details of a curriculum have to be looked at. You know, the details,
Yes.
like you said, the feminine energy focuses on the details of that curriculum. And yeah, if I'm now leaving the balloon experiment and now we're getting into a cadaver or something like that, and I got questions and you don't know the answer to those questions, and I'm not saying you should have an answer to every one of my questions, but remember, you can engage me in dialogue and say, you know what, that's a great question. Let's actually delve into that. But you're so focused on the curriculum of a thing that you're like, no, no, that's not what we're focused on right now. Let us stick to the outline that we have, you know. And then something you said, which, it the masculinity of things and just breaking down, well, not breaking it down, yeah, but breaking it down to the essence of what it actually is. I think also gravitates over into entrepreneurship. You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to find out what is the underlining connection between these things. so that I can have a system that is put in place that will always work. That
Right.
thinker. I just love it, and that's why I love math and science, because it forces you to think outside the box. Sometimes when they have always had a box around it, to think objectively, remove yourself from the subjective feelings of things, and think. Just don't get upset at the fact that I'm challenge you, but challenge your thinking.
Right, right. And that like that's a biggest hiccup that shuts us down because our the way our minds work, just as black people, we're forward thinking people.
Right,
We're not really dwelling on the past too much. We're forward thinking people. So in thinking forward, like you said, you come up with the questions, and now it's like I'm asking these questions. They say, no, we're we're sticking here. We're not going ahead yet, but I'm ready to go ahead. you know, and that's where the cookie cutter thing comes in. And that's why a lot of us quit early because we're ready for the next phase and now we're bored.
right,
We've already we understand this. Like you did this on a Monday. I got it by 3 o'clock. The other kids are still struggling. That's not my fault. But now I'm ready. So it's like, okay, I play off because you're gonna be doing this lesson the whole week.
right,
Now I'm done. I don't know what to do. So I'm just gonna, now I'm wasting time. Just imagine if there's 5 days to teach a concept and I get it in the first day. What am I going to do for these next 4 days?
right, right,
You feel me? So that affects us. So now when you continually go through that, elementary school, middle school, high school, it kind of gets to the point where it's like, why am I here?
right.
You lose your drive, you lose the want to do it because as men, as growing up as black boys, like a lot of people don't understand, we have a natural thirst for knowledge,
Yeah.
for learning, for exploration. We love that shit.
Mhm.
You know, we just lose it because it's not stimulated on a regular basis. And then when it's supposed to be stimulated in the realms that it's supposed to be stimulated in, we're far more advanced than we're supposed to be, quote unquote, because we still have to, they got to dumb us all down to make us even with everybody else. And that's not the case. And that makes us quit. That makes us give up, you know?
And then you said in your book, you said when masculinity is neither cultured or nor cultivated, it becomes a challenge. It becomes that challenge. That's why you can see somebody who's even in a PhD program, and they're like, yo, I gotta write this paper, man. But the time, that they put towards it is not the time that they know that they can put towards it, because of what you said earlier, right? It became a habit as a young black boy. It became a habit where, okay, well, I got time. I work better under pressure. No, the pressure came from somewhere else, because you always
Mhm.
felt like you had time to begin with, because the teacher had to tend to, I don't know, 28, 29 other kids in the classroom, because everybody has to be on the same page. Like, so like you said, I'm over there just playing on the side on my phone or whatever, because I'm so bored. I got it already. Let's move on to the next thing. You got to keep
Yep.
me engaged. You got to keep me that thirst. You gotta quench my thirst, basically. you know
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely it. So like how do you maneuver with this? Because it's like once we get our degrees and once we get to this point, um, a lot of the essential pieces of us, it changes. Like you said, people will question, if you're really a scientist. Like they see you, with your do rag on, you're chilling. You feel me? You're comfortable.
Mhm.
You're comfortable as yourself. They'll say, "Oh, you're really a scientist." I've even had my own nephew ask me one time. He was like, "Yo, you're not a scientist." I was like, "I am a scientist, bro. Like, why can't I be?"
Right.
You know. And how do you how do you maneuver in that? Because it's like it seems, it's like you said, it's trying to strip our essence not only just from the masculine perspective but just culturally too.
Mm.
You know, it's that thin line where we cannot remain ourselves in our culture in that environment. So how do you go about not only maneuvering in it but also still being able to set the example to the younger generation that you can be who you are as you are in this space.
Right. I would say it took me a while to actually define it, but I've always operated in it. And
Mhm.
what I've always operated in is that It's I call it my life guiding cues, and it's simply put like this: my journey is self-defining, self-fulfilling, and self-enlightening. Why do I
Mhm.
start with self? Is because if I am no good to myself, how much of an asset or how much of a positive being am I going to be to my family and my community? Because even though we go through these challenges and we, hit these brick walls at times, there are still people that are here with us, and those people that have transitioned and become our ancestors for our highest good that have invested in you. So
Mhm.
I'll walk around with the knowing that you're not just looking at Patrick, but you're looking at everybody that has invested in Patrick, from a Madam C.J. Walker to a George Washington Carver to a Himhotep. You know, these people have invested in me. So I got to walk around with a certain level of confidence. I got to walk around with a certain level of respect for myself and respect for my fellow brother and respect for my fellow sister. So the way I operate is going to be different, and I've seen it in you. I've been around you. There's certain times when a black man could walk into a room and he don't got to say nothing, and you just feel his energy.
Mhm.
So I don't got to tell you who I don't got to give you a title of who I am. You already feel it because there's
Right, right.
1,000 ancestors that just walked in a room with me. So it sounds confident, but and it takes work. It's not something that you just do for a little while and that's it. No, no, no. You gotta always read. You always gotta be in tune with your ancestors. You always gotta do your spiritual work. You always gotta, I'm big on writing. The writing allows you to see your flaws, to see your weaknesses, to see your strengths, to see your positive sides. And then it just continues building. And then you just start seeing things just moving in such a way, either a way for you or it's going to move out of your way, and it's like I can be whatever I want to be. So if I don't want to be a scientist no more, cool, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. If I don't want to be an entrepreneur, I could be a chemist. I could be whatever I want to be, and I'm gonna do that because of who I am, which is
Mhm.
self-defining, self-fulfilling, and self-enlightening at all spectrums of my life.
Yeah, and that's something that like is very, very big for our younger people to see
Right.
that, see the authenticity because I got like, luckily I just had the affinity to science, but like you, I didn't see anybody like me.
Right.
I didn't really see anybody in that space that looked like me, that acted like me, that talked like me. You know what I mean? Like, like I would go to school, get an A in a science test, and come back and do some crazy shit in the streets. Like, you feel me? So it's like to see that and to know that there's that comfort. It's like I was able to still break the mold, but at the same time, it's like as I went higher up, I started to see that I was changing.
Hmm.
I was changing, and I was no longer. I was disconnecting. I was no longer in reach to the very people that I just left.
Mm.
You know, and it started to become a reality because like when we get to that point, that's when it was my aha moment that okay, the higher up we go, the farther away we get from our people. And we start to get into those realms of the talented 10. We start to get into those realms of the superiority complex. Like, yo, I'm here, like, and you're down there. It's like, nah, that's there's so much raw, untapped potential mentally,
Right.
scientifically that is gone, that is in the hood right now, that is in these our normal communities, not the ones that everybody strives to be, but the ones that we comfortably are. Like, for example, the hip hop community,
Hmm.
that's pretty much the focal point and the voice of where we are. Everybody wants to listen to the trap music. Everybody want to listen to this music, but they want to detach from it to be, to appeal and to be less threatening or whatever the case may be. But there's still some raw, untapped potential that's right there. And that bridge can't be made if they see it disconnected. Like I said, it came to me when my nephew was like, yo, you're not a scientist.
Mm,
I was like, why? Why? Like, why can't I be? I'm like, and it changed my perspective because I'm looking at him like, yo, I'm an extension of you and you're an extension of me.
mm,
And you cannot see that being, because when you're with your family, you're in your own comfortable space. So his envision of a scientist, white coat, glasses,
right.
speaking, always using big words. He's like, yo, how is my uncle how is he a scientist when all he do is joke on me? All we do is play, and he's like, he doesn't, and he was like, you don't use big words like that. I said, because you're my family. I don't have to use those words with
Mm,
you, but you know what I mean? I'm a scientist. So it's like that disconnect is a bridge that we collectively as a culture have to fix, because a lot of our boys, they're not able to see that and comfortably see that within themselves, without the arrogance, without one side from it being the arrogance of it all, and then the other side of it being completely lost,
mm,
you know
right.
completely lost. Like I got my homies who was, they know that I went to college and everything, but I never got that rap that conventional, like, yo, when I left the hood, they called me college boy. I never got that,
Yeah,
and I realized that I never got that because I kept my essence. So it's like,
right.
how do we keep that? How do we comfortably keep that and still maintain the balance in there? Because it's like most of what we have to do is kind of like detaching. Like you have to quote unquote be professional. We know what professional really means,
Hmm.
but you got to be professional. So how do you show that to somebody who aspires to be a scientist but can't see themselves outside of where they are?
It's a great question. Um, I like I said earlier, um, and I love our generation now because this the push for doing the work as it's called is really 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 important. Why do I say it's important? Because I do believe the biggest crisis that we see in the world is the identity crisis.
Mm,
If you
yes.
don't know who you are, how do you know where you're going and how do you know where you came from? You know, um, but when you do, even let me not even say you have to get like a whole 100% on the exam of the, who you are. No, when you just unlock the door, it becomes a problem. There were times I was sitting in the lab, you know, I'm over here doing this thing called T's fiber analysis, where you take a neuron, not a neuron, the sciatic nerve out from a mouse, and you're teasing apart the nerve fiber like strand by strand, a crazy process. But
Hmm.
at the same time, with my headphones on, somebody steps by my lab section and they see my phone going on off with YouTube on it, and they're like, "What are you listening to? What are you looking at?" I'm over here listening to the master teachers. I'm over here listening
Hmm.
to Henry Clark, and they're like, why you I remember one it was one undergrad. He used to always come around me. He's like, you listen to a lot of like pro black stuff. Like, why do you how do you do that? I said, because at the same time as this at the same time I'm doing my scientific studies, I'm also studying myself. I'm studying
Hmm.
my people. Remember I said earlier that, when you look at Patrick, you're not just looking at Patrick. You're looking at everybody that has invested into Patrick. So when I'm listening to Martin Luther King Jr. and I hear him, or I'm listening to somebody that's talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and I hear them say that I fear that I've integrated my people into a burning house, because as
Hmm.
a black boy and as a black man, I'm holistic in my thinking. I have to start to question myself and say, am I integrating myself into a burning house? You know, as
Ooh,
a
man.
scientist, You know, I said I'm about the promotion of life. I'm about the beauty of everything that is life. And I'm over here dissecting a mouse. Before I got the sciatic nerve out that mouse, what did I have to do? I had to what? Put it to sleep.
Hmm.
So I had to step back and say, nah, I got, and it's just these things that you do that we just take for granted, such as reading or sitting. by the lake and just being with your thoughts, being with yourself is going to help you define what professionalism is and not have to use the scope or the lens of somebody else's definition of professionalism. And you're gonna come across people that's gonna be like, oh, that's one arrogant. I don't know if I should curse or not, but that's one arrogant MF.
You can do your thing, bro.
So that's an arrogant motherfucker. And it's like, no, I did the work. I know who I am. So the energy that is exuding out of me might be offensive to you. I don't know if you've done the work. I don't know if you're willing to do the work. But it took me a long deal and a long time to structure what you see before you hear, not just as a scientist, but a scientist for his people or a scientist for her people, So as you do the work for yourself, on yourself continuously, that level of professionalism will be it'll be defined, and even when you're questioned by your peers or you're questioned by your family or you're questioned by your community, they're gonna have to respect it. They may not love it, but they're gonna have to respect it and be like, you know what? Maybe I should rethink the vision of what a scientist is, because my uncle's a scientist. My sister is a scientist. There's people that's scientists right now that don't even know it. They'll be selling
Right.
CMOS on IG, and you spent information about your CMOS.
You have gone through the scientific process to understand that, and they don't because we have made science such a phenomenal thing when it's really basic. Like, they have made it seem like the scientist in essence, like I said, I have an episode called The Warrior, the Thinker, and the Messenger. And the thinker is basically the scientist, but the thinker, people, it's just the science is the ability to use your mind.
Yes.
Even from the word expression, like the word science means to know. That's it.
Right. Oh,
what I mean? So as somebody who practices science, it just means you practice the ability to know. Hey, huddle up, broskies, because it's time to elevate. The secret to evolving masculinity is to define it, understand it, then apply it. The So Frail series defines masculinity as the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment of the essence of analysis and deconstruction. From this definition, I explain how masculinity is not just the hat that we wear, but it's the essence that we must exude through application. If you enjoy the So Frail conversations, why not read the books that inspire them? Visit IamJustSeen.com right now to add the So Frail series to your library to get a better understanding of what masculinity really is. I promise, after reading So Frail, you will never look at masculinity the same again. You feel me? And that speaking of words and using them, and how you just broke down professionalism, one thing that we have to understand is that when they call us professionals, when they say that we're professionals, it's twofold. I always ask, like, when people ask me, they say, am I professional at certain things? I'm like, are you saying professional as opposed to skill or appeasement to Caucasian reality? Because when we say professional, that's not professional. That's not this. Like, no, it's very professional. Do you know how good I am at this shit? Like, that's like, you don't know the skill. Like you said, it's when people say, oh, you could be arrogant, but it's like, am I arrogant or am I more confident in myself than you are? Like, because we have to put that into perspective. A lot of us get called arrogant, especially as Black men. We get called arrogant for minimal shit because, they don't expect us to be where we are.
Right.
And when we get to that point, it's like, you're not supposed to be up there. So I'm going to tell you what your confidence level should be based off of mine. And, you got to correct them. Like, I was in Philly and somebody was like, yo, you're overconfident. I said, by my standard or yours. And the room got quiet. Everybody was like, yo, you didn't have to come for me and say that I wasn't, like, I'm qualified for the shit that I do.
Yep.
So when you tell me to be professional, are you telling me to appease a certain people? Are you speaking on my quality? You feel what I'm saying? LeBron James is a professional basketball player because of his skill set. But at the same time, they want you to think he's the professional because he doesn't cuss in public, he doesn't do these things and all of that. No, that's appeasement to the Caucasian reality. I'm not a professional in that regard. But when it comes to the skills and the shit that I've studied and put my work in, I'm a professional like a motherfucker. And you're not gonna take that away from me.
Right.
You know? And that comes into my reality of being able to be comfortable to give to the youth and say, oh, yeah, I'm very professional with what I do. And I'm going to speak to you this way because this is how you talk. This is how I have to interact with you. This is how I'm able to interact with you now. But this doesn't take away from my skill set. Yeah, I may not appeal to Caucasian reality. That's not what I'm here for. Their reality doesn't appeal to me. So forget their reality. But as far as my skill set, I am a professional in what I do. You know, that can't be taken away from me. You know, and that was really put into perspective for me when I let my mom proofread my book, Hitting It Raw. And she said, your book is not professional. Because now, granted, I did a lot of cussing in it, but it wasn't a lot, but it was just more so I'm telling the story and I'm breaking it down. I said, now, is it not professional? Or she was like, well, sometimes, you know, it's too much slang, it's too much this. I said, okay, does that take away from it being professional? She was like, yes. I said, how? She said, because you're using a language that I said, that's the point. You're not paying attention to my information.
Right.
You're not even saying that like I'm qualified. You're like, that's not even an argument. And that's something that we face is, you know, in the institutional part, you know, a lot of times it's a presentation that we're putting in that they're talking about when they say professionalism, not even our skill set.
Yeah.
You know, you have to say it this way. You have to write it this way. You know, what broke me out of that was when I was studying Dr. Booker T. Coleman. And he said one powerful line to me. He said, if you cannot explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yo, that is a fact.
You feel me? Professionalism is like how we look at professionalism now. It's to make you confuse a motherfucker. Like, you feel me? If I'm giving you a presentation and I'm using only the words you understand, I can't teach the people who don't get it. You know, but when I'm coming from this perspective and it's like, yo, this is what it is. And yo, how did you break that down so easy? Because I needed to be for a 6-year-old to understand it. That's professional, I feel. Because my skill set is so high, it's so in tune that I'm able to give it back down. No matter how far I've gone, I can give it back down for a 6-year-old to stop asking why.
Right. And you know, I with what you just said, you know, all this, because at this stage, people may not like it, but what you're doing, what I'm doing is teaching. At the same time, we're learning as we're teaching. But I'm supposed to break something down in such a very basic and clear understanding of what I'm trying to relay to you. It's my reason for doing that is so that you can use the information that I'm providing or that I'm sharing as an instrument of liberation. If I'm giving you something that's high on words, very complex, and I'm just, you know, talking, you need to leave it alone. Because how is that going to liberate you? You know,
it's not.
I remember
it's going to put you in a perspective just to be able to talk about it.
Exactly. And then we're getting into an area where it doesn't fuel me. It doesn't fuel my family. It doesn't fuel my community. I remember Dr. John Henry Clark said, he said, take a serious, in-depth look at your life. Everything that you touch, your life must be an instrument of your liberation, or you must throw it in the ashes of history. You know, and that's why he also did a debate that I recalled. He said, I only, in the debate, he had a small segment that I take and I cherish it to this day. I only debate with my equals, all others I teach. You know,
that's a fact.
Throw away what you just said, professionalism, because it is skewed to that Eurocentric, you know, this is how we do things and you need to follow in according to suit. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And it's like it's rooted in the memory of it all. It's like memorization. It's like, yo, when I know what I'm talking about, it doesn't matter. I can make you understand it from whatever realm I'm choosing to.
Right.
You know, but when you don't understand what you're saying, you're just giving me this information. And it's like I know so many people, like case in point, when we look at the quote unquote conscious community,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in and out of it. I'm in it one aspect, but for the most part, with the conscious community, they had this whole era. You know, about 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was quote unquote dropping knowledge, right?
Right.
And all they were doing was reposting memes. And if you would go to their comments and you would ask them, "Yo, what does this mean?" Go Google it. Do your own research. Like, hold on, wait. I feel like and one of my biggest hangups was if I ever posted it, understand that I'm gonna go the distance with it. I had a homie tell me like, "Yo, stop arguing with people in your comments." I said, "I'm not arguing. They asked the question, and because this is what I stand on."
Right.
But then I got to that point where I understood that that's the difference between quote unquote the smarts of it all and dropping knowledge. People are dropping so much knowledge, but there's not been much application. There's not been much application. And I say that this is not a arrogant thing when I'm saying this, but there's people who, when I started my entrepreneur journey 4 or 5 years ago, and they inspired me to start my shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yo, you dropping all of this knowledge, bro. And I've surpassed them. So it's like I was doing the application while you were just dropping the knowledge. And it's like, where do we come from that? So now, like once you get to the point of applying the knowledge, the shit that you drop is different.
Right.
You feel me? It's like for my stuff, it's not a repost. It's not me stealing a meme. It's not me, telling you to go to Google. Like I would, and that's one of my vices. I would answer somebody's question to the end, because it's like, yo, I really stand on this shit.
Right.
Like,
right. You live it.
Exactly. And that's how that academic structure is about. It's not about applying. That's why they have that phrase, those who can do and those who can't teach.
Boy.
That is a powerful sentiment. I don't think people catch on to what it really means. They said those who can do, but those who can't teach. If you can't do it, you can't teach it. Like, right. But you feel me? If you really thought about that, if you can't do it yourself, how can you teach me?
Now, what you just said, I want the listeners to really think about what you just said and then think about the present pandemic, quote unquote, that we're in. Right?
Exactly.
Are on the television acting as if they know. They're telling you all this data, they're telling you all this, they're telling you all that. And within your spirit, all that you know, you're like, something ain't right. Reason for pointing that out is to connect back to what I said earlier. That's why I said STEM is actually a spiritual component. This physical shit where we doing about, I'm giving a presentation here, or I'm going to have a talk here. No, it's an actual spiritual component that you will be able to identify bullshit when you hear it.
Facts.
So,
facts. Like when I transitioned out of the religious mentality and I started getting into spirituality, one thing that I've always learned, and one thing, no matter what African spiritual system it is, no matter what, landmass it was from, there was a common thing that science was infused into spirituality.
Yep.
You had to be able to use both science and mathematics. The reason why is because those principles, like we look at science and mathematics as classes. That's where our biggest hangup is. We look at them as classes, right. Science class, math class, not principles, not ideologies, not conceptualizations that you have to use.
Right.
So when I break down, when I started to do my studies, it was saying that science is the ability to qualify. Science and mathematics is the ability to quantify. Everything that you experience in this world, you should be able to both qualify it and quantify it.
Yep.
You feel me? And there's like our spiritual system, every spiritual system, it gave you the science. You have to qualify. So when people say, my intuition said this, you're qualifying it. That is a scientific thought process. You have to qualify whether that's right or not.
Right.
You have to use, it's like, yo, you did this, that, and the third. Women are good for it. I love y'all to life. But like, when y'all have tallied up all of your details, you feel me? You use science and mathematics to come to your conclusion.
Right. You watch it now and everything. You're like, yo,
yep.
What time is he going to get up and start to go to the bathroom so he can text whoever I think he texted, That's the
Yep.
scientist.
That is a scientific mind because you have a quantity of things. You have quantified something. Okay, every time you do this, I pay attention to that. And then your intuition qualifies it. And then you say, okay, now we're gonna argue or we're gonna do whatever we're gonna do.
Mhm.
And that's a funny point, but that's to show how simple how simple something really is, but how complex we have made it.
Mm, mm.
You see what I'm saying? Like to know that you have conducted a scientific experiment when you have put two and two together.
It's a beautiful
It's literally that simple, because like I said, science is the qualification of things, and mathematics is the quantification of things, and we have to get back to that essence because we follow religion that doesn't teach us that.
right. Right.
We don't follow spirituality anymore. We follow religion, and I know a lot of people say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, but I follow religious doctrine. You're not spiritual then.
Right.
Like it doesn't work. You can't. The doctrine that you follow is what you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at the spirituality component of it, that's one of the biggest pieces of our scientific mind. Because you have to be able to think and feel. You have to be able to qualify and quantify. All these things have to work hand in hand. And I learned that I started to really pay attention to that concept when I was in med school, when we were trying to find nerves. So now when you learning it in class, you get a blue one, they color it for you so you
Uh-huh.
can see it on the chart. You don't see that shit in the body.
Nope.
It all look the same.
Right.
You feel me? You can't just, okay, I'm looking for a red nerve. No, wait, hold on, wait. It's supposed to be here. So I had some classmates, like my little group or whatnot. I was the only black one in this group.
Mm-hmm.
And there's three other white guys, and they're like, it's supposed to be here. And I would look at it and I would just go in with my little forceps and I would pinch back and peel back the fat. I'm like, there you go. They'd be like, how did you find it? I
Mm.
said, because you got to see it. And at the time, I didn't know that I was seeing with my intuition. I was just like, yo, it's right there. You can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no, I don't see it. I said, it's right. I said, give me the thing,
Right.
bro. And I just moved a little bit of fat and pulled it up. I said, here's the nerve. They're like, how are you so good at finding that? I said, it's right there. You can see it. I didn't know that I was seeing with my higher vision.
You see, and I didn't even know that about you, but the thing that I had mentioned earlier about the T's fiber analysis,
Mm-hmm.
very similar experience because people I would have to train some of the undergrads that would come into the lab to do the T's fiber analysis, and it would take them. I'm talking about a long time. I learned it in a very rapid, like few weeks, and
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about taking those nerves and like hair strands, just teasing apart hair strands. And like you said, there were times when it wasn't me doing it. I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't my hands doing it. It was like I was being guided. And I would
Mm-hmm.
one slide, maybe knock out 3 slides in a day, and it's just that's why that intuition it does lead you and guide you in such a way that it has to be spiritual. There's a spiritual component to it. Similar to me, I had to walk away from church because actually goes back to the young black boy. You start to ask questions that you get scolded for because it's just that's just the way it is in the Bible, or that's just the way God wants it. No, it's not that simple. Because you want
Yeah.
it to be that simple doesn't mean that it's that simple. That's not how it works.
And that's a fact. That's a fact. And and a lot of times it's the religious mind that keeps a lot of us from thinking.
That's true.
It's sad as it is. And that's why I'm such a big advocate with connecting masculinity with STEM in that regard that, you cannot think if all you do is believe.
Mm,
Belief does not allow you to think. And as hard as it is sometimes, and as hard as it is for a pill to swallow, it's like if you are a believer, you are not a thinker.
hmm,
And that kind of hurts people's feelings to hear that
right.
because it's like if you cannot do that, you can't use your mind outside of that. You have to rely on belief. You have to rely on what you see, and you cannot use your intuition and your inner thought. You feel what I mean? Your inner wisdom. And a lot of things that would tell you, like so many times we go through stuff and then in hindsight we say, I knew that I was gonna mess up. Why didn't you trust yourself?
Mm.
If you knew this was gonna go that way. And it's like because we have a religious mindset. And there's people right now who have said, oh, I gave up the religion, but they kept the religiosity mindset. You still operate from belief.
Talk about it.
You feel what I'm saying? A lot of us do it in the conscious community, in the woke community. We have given up. Let's give up the white man's religion, but you keep the religiosity that's under it. So when you go into astrology, you go into tarot with the same belief system. This is why when you go and get your readings, you're like, I'm expecting the worst because religion taught you to always expect the worst.
See?
That's why you still expect the worst no matter where you go. You know, and that ties into the full capacity of the importance of not only STEM but masculinity as well, because masculinity cannot thrive in a religious mindset.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
When people start to realize they're like, yo, I just couldn't do religion anymore, your masculinity started coming back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, yo, there's too many contradictions. It just, yes, you're critically thinking now. It doesn't make sense. You cannot just believe it anymore. You're not a child. You're not a kid. You can't just say, okay, here, believe this, it works. You start to critically think about everything, you know, and that ties into it. And that brings into the point where you're like, okay, now if I segue this back into the scientific realm, now I'm able to understand it. Now I'm able to see it, you know, because when you come into the STEM disciplines, you come into these things and you're not able to think, you will fail.
Yeah.
If
That's
you're
it.
trying to believe and remember STEM, it's not going to work. You will fail. You have to know this shit.
Right. Right.
You know, you got to use your mind with it.
And it's always gonna come to you as that in the form of a decision. You're gonna have to make a decision constantly, you know. And I remember when I first encountered calculus. Oh my goodness, you know, I'm just like, I can't do this, and I need help, not knowing that I can do it, and the help is within me if I
Mm-hmm.
listen to my inner being, if I allow myself to see with a different set of eyes, you know, and then it just becomes it's freeing. It is so freeing that you don't have to just believe everything that you see, believe everything that you hear. You can say, this is what it is, and this is how I'm going to operate, and that's just it. Like, if you don't like it, get out the way or get run over. That's just it.
Yeah, it's and that's the point that our boys are in. You know, when we look at it, it's like because my thing is I've always wondered this. Like every high school dropout that I ever met, every homeboy that I had that didn't finish school, they ran the streets. How?
Mm,
How are y'all able to do that? Like y'all are running the streets like y'all running businesses.
mm,
So it's like you're not stupid as people want to believe. Oh, you don't go to school. You know that's the school system doesn't teach you it. It trains you.
right,
You know, and I'm like they drop out of school. The next year they flipping bricks, and I'm like, yo, how did you do this in a year? And it's like their mind is now open and allowing the masculine essence to work.
right.
It cannot work in this education system. You know,
With
there's the few anomalies. Like, you know, when you look at, you know, people like you and I, like we've made it to the academia levels,
mhm,
you know, and it's like, well, you guys kept yours in, but you don't understand the hurdles we had to get through,
she,
the fights we had to go through to get to this point. Like where it's like, yo, bro, my masculine essence is kicking in right now. And I'm trying to like, but you're trying to suppress it. And I know, and when you don't know that you know this, but it's like, you know, something's not right. It's like, why is there so much friction here? You know, I've had teachers literally call my mom because I told them they were wrong and they were wrong. And they told my mom, they was like, he was wrong. Like they was like, well, he kept calling me wrong. I said, Mom, she was wrong. And she was like, but I'm like, no, you're teaching me something and you're wrong.
right, right,
I said, I'm the only one that sees like, and my mom's like, you can't be telling the teacher they're wrong. She's wrong. How is she teaching something and she's wrong?
right.
And see, that's when it's the memory thing. And it's like, they said, well, don't They were like, don't disrespect me in front of the class or
Mm.
don't talk back or anything like, but you're wrong. I'm not disrespecting you. I'm not trying to talk down to you, but you're wrong. So if I'm supposed to be quiet when you're wrong and you're giving 27 students the wrong thing, who's the worst person in this scenario?
Right, right,
You feel me? So now let's just say this was a very, very quintessential piece of life, and you have just taught 27 minds the wrong information. Everything they build on after that is wrong.
Hmm.
You feel what I'm saying? Like, if everything they build on from that point forward and that was wrong information, their entire foundation is wrong.
See,
So, you know, that came to me as a kid. And that was natural. I would tell if a teacher was wrong, I'm like, yo, that's not the right answer. Yes, it is the right. No, it's not, because you were supposed to do that. You know what? You're right, but don't correct me.
Hmm.
You're wrong. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? I can't internalize wrong information because it's wrong.
And
And that's where we get into it.
that,
Because as long as, they teach us to pass the test, but we trying to master the material, and we're like, hold up, wait, I gotta check that. That's when we get ADHD. That's when we get insubordination. That's when we get all these things. And it starts off because somebody could be wrong and we're just trying to correct them. Like, yo, you're not right with what you just said.
and they can't see that. It also is something that you said a while back that I took to heart, and it made me understand further why, not just for teachers, but for anybody who's doing what you do, if you don't love it, right, you won't able to be corrected in it. You know, with
Yep.
love, you said comes correction. And some
Mm-hmm.
people say, I love being a teacher. And if you love being a teacher, then you should be able to be corrected, even if you want to be a scholars, because it's not just a student. You have a scholar in front of you. How do you see that, in terms of those who are our teachers, our professors, our instructors, love and correction?
Yeah. They at that point they can't really love what they do. They've learned to be like they've loved the environment that it gives them.
Mm,
They don't love what they do. They love the environment. And now this now is going to, extend that quote that I just said about those who can do, those who can't teach. It's going to extend that because it's like, if you can't, I see why you can't do it.
mm. I see where you're going.
Like, you feel what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, you can't do it. So you're deciding to teach it, but you can't do it. So it's like, now when I correct you, I'm the bad guy because you can't do it. That's why you don't know what you're teaching. That's why you don't know what you're teaching is wrong, because you can't do it yourself.
Hmm.
You feel what I'm saying? You shouldn't be teaching anything you can't do yourself.
Right.
You know, we definitely talking about masculinity and STEM, so I don't want it to be a shameless plug. But like, when I was just talking to somebody about trading the other day,
Mhm.
and she was trying to get a little bit of advice from me about like which route she should go, because she said these people were trying to put something, like it was like a monthly subscription thing or whatnot, and you can sign up for some kind of marketing thing that they do with
Oh
trading.
God.
So I said, are they trading? She was like, what do you mean? I said, do they actively trade? She was like, I don't know. I said, what do you mean? How are they trying to get you to trade with them if they're not actively trading?
Hmm.
And she was like, you know what? I didn't really think about that. I said, you can't learn trading from somebody who's not actively doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just learning theory. And that's what a lot of those things do. They bring people in and they create a whole system or whatnot, but they don't really teach it. They don't teach you how to do it. And she was like, well, yeah, they talk about we're going to use these signals and these indicators. I said, if they can't do the shit without signals and indicators, they don't know what they're doing.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not trying to be funny because I do know what I'm doing, but I'm just being real. Like, you can't teach it if you don't know how to do it.
Right. Right.
Like, and and for that same aspect, it would be wrong of me if somebody was like, yo, that was a wrong aspect, but then like, oh, I'll go back I'm like, no, that's not wrong. I'm not going to argue you down if you can show me that is wrong. Now we will have the exchange to where we come to the consensus of what it is, But as a teacher, if you can't do it, that is the wrong mentality to have, that those who can do, those who can't teach. I know so many teachers who, I know when I was in undergrad, I know people who was comfortable just getting a C in calculus or C in the mathematics, and they were going to be math teachers.
That is
I
so.
said, yeah, they're like, because I love to teach. You don't love to teach. You love to give information out. That's not teaching. I said, you can't even do the shit you about to go teach.
Hmm.
Well, as long as I get my C so I can graduate, but you're going to teach. You got a C in the shit you're supposed to be teaching.
Right. Right.
You're not even good at it. Like, you feel me? People, I know people who hate math, but they're still trying to be math teachers.
Yo, where does that come from?
It's because, like I said, those who can do, those who can't teach. Teaching is, and this is no slight to teachers. If you're a teacher, you're an educator, I still respect everything you do. But what I'm going to say right now may be offensive, but it's the reality. This is why teachers don't get paid shit, because those who can do the shit and those who can't teach. They base that mentality and they pay you according to that. Because if you could actually do what you're doing, you wouldn't be a teacher.
Mm.
You would be somebody who's actively doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like when you see this, the science teacher is not the scientist in today's times. Think about that, bro.
Right, right.
You have science teachers that aren't scientists.
Right, right.
Because the school system is a training grounds. It is not a educate. You're not learning. You're being trained. That's why those who can do and those who can't teach, because I can train you to do the shit that I failed at. That's why I get the curriculum. They give me everything to do it. I get the curriculum, I get the packet, I get the lesson plans I got to do, and I just give it to you.
You see,
I don't really know what I'm doing.
What you just touched on now, it gave me like so much insight into the other side of the coin, which is when we're talking about the young scholars, the children, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So when that kind of disdain for that subject, because you're just looking at it as a subject, starts to settle in, it's going to take a lot of undoing to undo the doing that has been done on the young mind. You know,
Yep.
so when that person is like, why do I got to take a science course? Not just because you're a science major, but this is the foundational stuff you're going to need to take organic chemistry. This is the foundational stuff you're going to need to know how to do, to carry your experiment through, you know, but not knowing, because somebody is just teaching it and not actually doing it. Now we got a problem.
Yep.
That becomes a trickle
Yep.
effect.
Because they can't give you any insight behind it.
Right.
You feel me? So it's like, imagine this, bro. What if the reason why a lot of our black boys hate math and science is because they're learning it from a person who does not like math and science? But I'm teaching it because I can give you a curriculum. I may not know how to do it, but I can give you the information behind it and get paid to do so.
Right.
There's no excitement in it.
And now we got distant learning in place because of everything that's happening. So the person's not in front of you no longer. You have to deal with either your mom, your dad, or whoever your guardian is, to be dependent on them to show you something that they didn't even sign up for. You know, they didn't sign up to be the teacher. They said, look, you go to school, you get it done. And this is why I said science has to become part of our everyday life. Not that you have to know everything of science, but you don't frown your face upon it when it's being presented to you. You know, you can be able to, like I said earlier, to be able to identify the BS when you see it and say, you know what, I'm not going to go into the hospital because I know I don't have this thing. You know, I'm not saying be the doctor. Yes, get the proper assessments and stuff like that. But everything that you see, everything that you hear on television, reading the books, reading newspapers, whatever, it is advice to you. And you take it with a grain of salt. And then you become the scientist and you do your analysis and seek out the truth.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And you mentioned going to the hospitals and listening to the doctors. This will be some whistleblowing type shit, but the doctors, you feel me? they are making a guess as to what's wrong with you when you come in there.
Mm.
They're guessing.
Talk about it.
They're articulating a good guess. All right. And this is when you come into the doctor's office. Hey, this is what's wrong with me. This hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. I'm going to go to my database and make an educated guess onto what I think it really is.
Talk about it.
And that's it. And it seems like I'm very smart. It seems like I'm very like no. It's just see the thing about the doctors, like you have to remember so much to be able to bring it all back together and say, hey, this is the particular thing, because you're dealing with that, this, and the third. But you're not really, there's no real critical thought. Everything is systematic. Everything is about, okay, if I have X, Y, Z, I'm going to make the assumption that it's this. That's why so many times they look at certain situations and it's a misdiagnosis. This is why malpractice insurance is a reality.
Yep.
Because if these motherfuckers really knew what they were doing, there wouldn't be a need for malpractice. But at the same time, when you look at it's an educated guess, and doctors like, yo, whoever I'm speaking to with this part, if a doctor can convince you to get an operation or something that has never been tried or tested before, you need to slap yourself. Like they're telling you, they will actively tell you this has never been done before and we don't know what could happen to you. And you go through with it, slap yourself.
Right.
Slap yourself.
Right.
This is why it's important to have a scientific mind, or at least be able to think about something.
Can I blow the whistle on the other end of the field for you? Because you already blew the whistle.
Do your thing, bro.
So as you said, on the medical side of things, and medical malpractice insurance being so high, we have to know that on the other side of the field are the STEM scientists doing the research, giving you the numbers. These things have to go through a number of trials before they can be put into the healthcare system.
Yep.
And when you read Harriet A. Washington's book, like Medical Apartheid and A Terrible Thing to Waste, environmental racism and things like that, now you can see how these things are being connected. Why do you think some people actually say, you know what, let me see if I can, and these are noble people that say, you know what, I want to really, really help my people. So I'm going to do this MD/PhD program. And I'm talking about these people, they're basically giving their life towards trying to bridge the gap between the healthcare system and STEM research to say, you know what, I'm going to make a change, which is not, you can try, but in my strong belief, it's never going to change, because these are two strong systems that have been put into place as cash cows. That's what they are.
Yep. Yeah. Something that I learned, I always say this, something that I learned about the American system, something to learn about Caucasians as a whole. If it has system attached to it, it works.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It works. You can't break it. No matter how much you try, you can't break it. You can't change it. The system works. The prison system works.
Right.
The education system works. Right. The healthcare system works. It is a system. They create, there's so many intricacies that you don't see. The judicial system, it works.
Yep.
It may not be working for you, but it works as it's supposed to function. That's a key point to that. These systems work as they're supposed to function. You think it's not fair. You think you want equal rights. You think you want equality. No, they work according to how they're supposed to function. And when they want to tweak it a little bit, they control how the system is going to be changed. Case in point, if we look at the judicial system and then we look at Black people fighting for civil rights. Black people never fought for Black rights. We fought for civil rights. Okay. Civil rights in a judicial system, and they create the system to make you look uncivilized.
Shit. That is true.
They told you what to fight for. The NAACP, like, these are white-run things that have told Black people what to fight for. So they told Dr. King and Rosa Parks and all of them, do civil rights, fight for civil rights. Now, what we're going to do is make sure our system still fucking works. So when you do anything uncivilized, and we're going to now create the imagery to show you always doing uncivilized shit. So when a cop does anything to you, you feel me? We have already created the narrative that you guys are uncivilized beings. Hell, you fought for civil rights. You fought for the ability to be civil. So what does that tell us from the history? That at one point you were uncivilized and you fought for your right to be civil. And we gave you that right to be civil. So now when we deem anything uncivilized, our judicial system will work. It fucking works.
Can't be mad at it.
You feel me? It's the system.
Right.
You know, the healthcare system. You can't get mad at Dr. Oz, who is a heart doctor, who tells you shit that fucks up your heart.
Right. Yo.
Like, come on. Like, it doesn't make sense. You know, I'm not going to go to my cardiologist to get my heart health. I know it seems backwards, like you're supposed to, but he doesn't get paid if my heart is healthy.
Talk about it. Right.
You feel me? So these things are why it's important for us to be in the STEM field and to be in this area with our natural Black minds, uncompromised, because we have to be able to go and challenge this, because this is what they're doing to us.
Right.
And then we all go to you go to the doctor and everything, and he got on a white coat. So, all right, my doctor said, I gotta take this new medicine. Why? What is the new medicine for? You tell me what this new medicine is for. Well, I got high blood pressure, but it's a different type of high blood pressure. So you got like 4 different high blood pressure pills. When high blood pressure is one thing. Like, how do they convince y'all that, because we don't know.
Right.
You feel me? We don't know the inner workings of it all. When they tell you high blood pressure, they don't tell you the physical aspect of high blood pressure, meaning that your vessels are constricted. So now they're telling you it's your food. They're telling you all this. You're like, yo, my high blood pressure doesn't go down, because they're not factoring into the nervous system part of it,
right,
where your body it stays in a sympathetic state of mind, which means you're in a fight or flight response. Why you think the news does the things that it does to us?
Talk about it.
To keep us in a sympathetic mode, so our bodies can be in fight or flight response. So our nerves, not our nerves, our vessels can stay constricted,
right?
Because the blood has to pump a lot faster because we're not calm.
Right.
So you think your high blood pressure is going to be solved by a pill. No, it's not. It's going to be solved when you get out of a state of fight or flight response, which you can't, because it's a system and the media is going to keep you there.
It's so real on like what you're doing, especially because I remember when I was reading your other book, the nutrition book. I can't remember the title right now. Hitting it raw, right? Just the section where you break down herbs, you break down fruits, and you break down veggies. Yo, everything we need is here. It's here. You gotta find it, and then 2, you gotta understand what's going on inside of you. Just like how we were talking about systems, you have systems within your body. If you understand how your system works, you can put things into your system, and you can remove things out of your system so that you can operate at your optimal health. You know, but if you're so dependent on television, if you're like, even shit, I know the shit works because of this example I'm about to give. In terms of the health world, right? Elderberry was never a over-the-counter drug. One day, sitting there watching television, all of a sudden, I see them. They put a commercial out there, and it says elderberry syrup. What? Like, elderberry was never a thing that was talked about. How did it all of a sudden become an over-the-counter, medicine that you can just buy from your local CVS or Walgreens? You know, and it's just I don't know along what point or along what time we just gave our power away. We gave our minds away. We just gave everything away because it's like, you know what? You all have the answers. No, you don't. No, you don't. I just need the assessment that you have to say, okay, my immunoglobulin is low. What actions do I take? You know?
And that's they're not going to give that to you. They're not going to give that to you. But the information is there for you to find.
Right.
You know, they write this information complexly. They write it like that. When I tell you that this shit is all simple, it's simple. It's real simple. The information, they use a lot of these big words and stuff. And that's why I always talk about etymology and the Latin language. When you start learning etymology in Latin,
Yeah.
you realize how simple the medical stuff really is. Because it's just not in normal English that you see all of these things. And you're like, oh, if I learned, like, you don't even have to know the language, but if you start to get familiar with it, you can start to see why certain things are named the way they're named,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes so much easier,
Right.
and that is like, that's where the great minds come in. That's where the black minds have to come in to stay black and be able to give it to your people the right way. You feel me? That right there is the reason why I had to unplug.
Hmm.
You feel me? I couldn't stay in it.
Right.
I couldn't stay in it. Only because of what I saw it doing to us. When I'm like I was telling you, like when I'm doing, my dissections, pulling out the nerves and finding the different things within the body, all of these bodies are Caucasian. I viewed over, let me see, 48. I viewed over almost 100 bodies, and all of them were all Caucasian bodies in the lab setting. None of them were black. So this is not about us. This is about keeping them alive.
Right.
They're using our minds to keep them alive. I won't do that shit anymore.
Right. Right. And
I won't do that shit anymore.
how did you, like, throughout the years, how did you just kind of transition from, because like when I decided no longer to pursue that PhD route because of the similar, not human cadavers and things like that, but just preserving our lives. I was like, this has nothing to do with my moral compass. This has nothing to do with my reason for being on this earth. How did you go about just transitioning into just fueling yourself, fueling your journey, knowing this is the path that I need to take? Because I ain't gonna lie, I suffered from depression because of some of the things that was going on, from what I was seeing, what I was being told, what was expected of me. I was like, nah, this is not me. How did you
Mm-hmm.
go about getting in your right mind and staying in your right mind?
For me, the transition was easy, but it was hard. The reason why it was hard was because my major is forensic biology. I always wanted to be a forensic biologist. I mean, forensic pathologist. So forensic pathologist, basically, the coroner, they find the causes of death.
Right.
My focus was always, okay, if I figure out the cause of death, I can figure out how to keep them alive. My vision, my goal, I've been talking about this for years, was reversing disease, keeping people alive, reversing disease, keeping people alive. So I said, maybe if I figure out how they died, I can do something reverse. And then as I'm going through these things, and it's just like, it clicked. It said, why wait till they die? Keep them alive while they're alive.
Mm.
And I said, oh shit, I don't need, and then my mindset changed from no longer focusing on death to focusing on life. And then when I did that, it just changed. It was like, oh shit, proactively, I don't have to wait till they die. Now let's focus on their nutrition. Let's focus on what they're eating.
Right.
And then you've read Hidden Raw, so the biggest theme of it is life in, life out.
Right.
That's where that came from. Because when I was in the West Indies, I started to see people that we was eating a lot of tropical fruits, mangoes and shit. And it was just like, I felt invigorated. I felt light, floaty and stuff. And I was like, man, this is a dope lifestyle. I can get into this.
Right.
And then I started to study that. Yo, this is what we're supposed to be.
Right.
So it's like, that was how it helped me to be able to say I can walk away from it. Because like I said, that was my lifelong dream, to be a forensic pathologist. But then it was like, why do I focus on death? Like, if I focus on the living and life, then, nobody should have to wait 70 years to find a cure for something for them, and they're not going to be able to be here to experience it. And then so from there, the first person I ran into once that epiphany went off was Dr. Sabian. After him, it was Dr. Africa, and then, Queen Afua, and
right.
The rest is history. I'm like, yo, there's people that's really actively doing it. And y'all say, yo, I need to be fucking with them. I need to learn from them, So I bought all of their books. I bought all of Queen Afua's books and read them. What is it? Sacred Woman, Man Heal Thyself, Know Thyself. All of Dr. Africa books, I read them. Dr. Sebi, I watched every lecture I could find on YouTube. And it was like, it gave me it's like I said, it kind of gave me my black mind back. I was like,
Yes.
yo, this is, and then I started to see from their perspective, everything is about death. From our perspective, it's always about life.
Life, right?
So it just helped me unpull the deeper I got into it, and then so when I started to see I don't need that system to do what I need to do, because I started making my own herbal vitamins. And I had a homeboy, he reversed an irregular heartbeat that he was born with that they said he couldn't. They said, yo, you can't reverse an irregular heartbeat. And so I was like, look, bro, try this and continue it. He said, yo, I went to the doctor. They said, my heart beats normal. It beats normal now.
Get that.
I was like, what you mean? He said, it's not irregular anymore. He said, what did you do? I ain't do shit. I just, told you about the earth.
Right, right.
The earth did it for you, you know? And those things just kind of put me in perspective. Okay, continue to study, continue to pull. And that's why I never finished, because the most they can do right now with whatever I do is call me crazy. That's it. Dave Chappelle showed me that. He told me that. He said the worst thing you can do, he said, if you don't necessarily have like accolades or anything like that, he said, if you have accolades, they'll strip them from you. And that will make it, hard. He said the worst thing that they would do to demonize you is call you crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You feel me? And I seen with Cat Williams, Dave Chappelle, they was like, yo, he turned down $50 million. And so I started to pay attention to it. And I had to put myself in a position where the most that you can do to me is call me crazy.
And don't forget to take a moment to go get your exclusive merchandise from Just Scenes merch. At Just Scenes, each piece is specifically crafted with positive imagery and symbolism. From the titles and designs to the descriptions, each style gives you something to feel great about. With everything from hoodies and tees to coffee mugs and tote bags, we have something for the entire family. So be sure to get yours today. Find us on Instagram at Just Scenes merch and get your merchandise right now.
You feel me?
Right.
But if you know me, I'm not fucking crazy.
No.
And I even say it sometimes too, when people are like, yo, are you crazy? I'm like, I might be crazy to their standard, but I'm definitely not insane. Keep that in mind. No matter how crazy a motherfucker call me, I'm not insane.
Right.
I am perfectly sane. I am in my logical right mind. So I'm crazy as hell to the standard, to what normalcy really is. But I'm very sane. I'm very sane.
It's so like real, like what you said. If you choose, and it's all right if you choose to stay within, the system, if you want to call it that. But just know they will put roadblocks in front of you. They will strip you of things. Like I remember finding out that they never gave Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, they never gave her tenureship. Why? Because of what she was teaching.
Yep.
And like I said, that is one of the pinnacles of a professor, of a PhD holder that's going into academia to get that tenureship, and that person deserves that tenureship, and you deny them that because it will be offensive to what you are. It's crazy.
It's emotional based, bro, and that's why we're needed, especially us as Black men. We're definitely needed in this space.
Facts.
There's no way around that shit in any way, shape, or form. And our peers, the elders, kind of got to let them do whatever they're going to do, and we got to focus on the youth that are into the science. And that was the main point, the science and the math. That's the main point that I wanted to have you up here, is because I know that you're putting in the work. You're connecting with the younger minds and everything like that, and giving them the breakthroughs that they need, where they once thought it was very difficult and challenging. And like, yo, this shit is really easy.
Exactly.
We're able to give that back to them, to give them that spark to keep it in there, because we're going to need them.
Right.
We're gonna need them. And so it's like going forward, like STEM and masculinity, these two things are gonna go hand in hand. They go hand in hand.
Right. Needed.
So we have to, it's good that we were able to have this conversation, to be able to break the stigma of STEM. It's not hard, y'all. Like, this shit is really easy. You just got to be able to be comfortable with yourself in order to do it. Like I said, science is the ability to know. It's not simply chemistry. It's not simply biology. It's not simply anthropology. It's the ability to know. So when you get this information, your mind says, how do I figure it out? That's it.
Right.
You're just training science. That scientific mind has trained himself or herself to be able to constantly figure out how something works.
Mm-hmm.
And you work until you do, but if you're so sure about everything, you can't, it's going to be hard to be a scientist. But we're in the age now where our people need it. People need it. So this was dope. You got any closing words that you want to say to the people?
Yeah.
Anything you want to mention?
Like I said, my IG is BK, the letter B, the letter K, Big Brother, all spelled out and all lowercase. And I just really thank you for allowing me to be a part of this podcast. And just your platform is truly, truly, truly educational, not just in the academic sense or in the day-to-day sense, but spiritually as well. And to everybody out there, just know that each of you were conceived by destiny, produced by purpose, and packaged with potential to live a meaningful and fulfilling life, no matter what you face. And like I said, again, thank you. I really, truly, truly appreciate it. And any way I can support, you can reach out to me on IG, or you can reach out to me through my website, www.patrick, Patrick, Akande, AKANDE.com.
Yeah, and I'm not going to wrap up. I'm not going to lead too much on that, because that last quote that you just put is powerful. Y'all make sure y'all write that down and y'all make that a daily affirmation. But as always, to follow me on Instagram at _just_scene_, and you can check me out at IamJustScene.com. And as always, be sure to kiss your babies. Now you get to the point where you learn to tap into their scientific mind, because all of our babies are scientific as fuck.
Right.
The reason why they ask you why so many times is because of their scientific mind.
Yep.
If you cannot answer why, it's okay. Do not stop that from them, though, but show them the way on how to get there. The only reason why that I'm the way that I am is because whenever I asked my mom why, she would act like she knew the answer, but she would say, I'm going to show you this. And she would give it to me, and then I would be reading it out loud. She would be teaching me how to read at the same time. So I'd be reading it out loud, and then she would just repeat back whatever I learned in a different way. Like she knew it, and it kept me entertained. I didn't know she was doing this until I got older, but it kept me engaged. And then she taught me to be a researcher. You feel what I'm saying? So if you cannot answer your baby's questions, it's perfectly fine. But just teach them how to find the answer. And you will always keep that scientific mind intact. So, like I said, with that, be sure to follow me on Instagram _just_scene_, and you can reach me at, find me on IamJustScene.com. And you can get my books, my courses, and pretty much everything else I do. So we had a good one. This was a positive one. I loved every minute of it. And we'll see you when we see you. Peace, love, knowledge, and freedom. We out.